Chris Doyle is the Director of Council for Arab-British Understanding and the current lead spokesperson for the Council. Dr. Doyle, thank you for making time for us and welcome. Let me just start by recapping what Netanyahu said, and I will do that verbatim. He says the elimination of Nasrallah is a necessary condition in achieving the objectives we have set, returning the residents of the north safely to their homes. And we also had the defense minister saying that if they are to do this, they will do it through military action. What do you make of these objectives by Israel?
It is an understandable objective to want to see the return of those 60,000 or so Israeli civilians to northern part of Israel. Similarly, it's a legitimate objective for Lebanese to want to return. They have actually more numbers to the south of Lebanon. But the assassination of Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, does not necessarily bring that any closer. It actually brings greater uncertainty. Before, you had a definite leadership grouping who can make decisions. I think one thing that troubles observers now is that Hezbollah has lost a lot of its leadership. Who takes over? What will be those decision-making mechanisms through which you may be able to come to some form of ceasefire and a withdrawal of Hezbollah forces north of Litani, as stipulated in UN Security Council Resolution 1701. So I think it's somewhat dubious to link the assassination of Nasrallah to being able to achieve those specific objectives. The other thing, if I may, is that what Israel and the United States are trying to do is completely decouple the situation in between Israel and Hezbollah from that with Gaza. And the whole of this began with Gaza, with those awful attacks on the 7th of October that killed over 1,200 people carried out by Hamas. And Hezbollah's initial burst of rocket fire onto the Shabaa farms was all about linking it to Gaza. And I think it is naive to think that you can have a ceasefire in the north without a ceasefire with Gaza. I think that we need to deal with both.
Let me actually talk about that, a ceasefire, because according to some members in the United Kingdom, they say that a ceasefire is a far cry because you are still arming Israel. So how can you call for a ceasefire when you're arming the aggressor?
Well, I've been very clear that we should not be providing weapons to the state of Israel. I think that the British government, the new British government, has started with the suspension of 30 arms licenses, but it's not enough. But actually, you can still call for a ceasefire even so, but you have to do far more than that. The issue is not about calling for a ceasefire, is how you're going to get there. And I think it needs to have a situation where Israel feels a cost to what it's doing. And over the last 11 months, the Israeli leadership has felt there is a green light. It can do whatever it wants, taking out civilian targets. It's taken out civilian infrastructure, water infrastructure in the Gaza Strip. It's not military in any way, shape or form. And I think what Lebanese are fearing, Lebanese civilians, is that what happened in Gaza over the last 11 months is now going to happen to Lebanon, because we see that there's targeting of Lebanese civilians. We've seen huge forcible evacuations from the south in massive numbers, and with further promises of Israeli action, that it will be Lebanon as a whole that will be punished for what Hezbollah has done. And that is really wrong, and it's wrong-headed. It won't bring Israeli citizens greater security, and it won't get them back to their homes, because we will see Hezbollah respond. There'll be more rocket fire. As long as there is rocket fire, those civilians cannot return to those homes. There has to be a political agreement. There isn't a military solution to this.
Mr. Doyle, I just want to know from you, what are your predictions of the future? Because we've been talking about an escalation. We've been talking about these countries, Israel, Lebanon, and Iran, going into a war. Do you predict something of that happening in the future if this escalation is not controlled?
Well, you might as well play bingo for this, because at the moment, and one of the scariest things is that there are so many scenarios. And most of those scenarios that one can paint are definitely in the it's going to get much worse category. I mean, we have seen already, a second attack by Israeli forces on Hodeidah, the port in Yemen, where most of the humanitarian aid comes in. That follows, of course, Houthi missile attacks on Israel. We also have to wonder as to whether there will be some more direct confrontation between Israel and Iran. That's possible, and that could escalate it. And of course, you have the American elections coming up. This plays into the regional politics as various actors make their calculations according to what they think the outcome of that election may or may not be. So it is very difficult. What I will say, I think a ceasefire at the moment, either in Gaza or between Israel and Hezbollah, is very unlikely, and not least because there is not the requisite urgency of key international actors, not least the United States.
All right, we'll have to end it there. I've been talking to the Director of Council for Arab-British Understanding and the current lead spokesperson for the Council, Mr. Chris Doyle. Thank you for talking to us today.
Pleasure.
For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.